Hello. Testing, testing, one, two, three, making sure that the mic is working. If you can hear me, let me know by letting us know in the YouTube chats. This is Wesley speaking from the Central Ohio Game Dev Group. It is February 26, 2022, on a Saturday. Pretty nice weather here in Ohio, in Columbus. Still a little chilly, but at least it's not rainy. Oh, cool. Good. Glad you guys can hear me. If I'm too loud, let me know. We've kind of been doing some testing here and there. Just want to make sure it's not crazy ear bleeding noise. But yeah, cool. It's good to see everybody, at least in the chat. And if you're not familiar with the Central Ohio Game Dev Group, we're a collection of game developers from around Ohio, and just kind of excited to have this GameDev Meetup group just to kind of do a couple of announcements. We've got a presentation today, some exciting news as we start to move into more of this year in our COG group events. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is, yes, I can turn up the volume. Yep, so I'll do that a little bit. Oh, I see. Let me actually. My mic is like hardly close to my face, so that'll probably help. All right, I'll turn it up a little bit. If it starts peaking too much, let me know. But it seems to be a lot better, so I'm gonna go ahead and switch over. Hello. Hi, everybody. If I'm kind of going like this back and forth today, let me know. I'm kind of working a couple different tools with a new setup today. So, but yeah, just as I mentioned before, I'm happy to be here today to kind of do our monthly Central Ohio Game Dev Meetup group. February for sure is interesting month for sure. And I know that these are kind of great times for us to kind of just get together and collect and just kind of get to talk to everybody. We get a lot of different folks from around Ohio that are always interested to see kind of what's kind of coming up along the horizon month to month. So this is a great way to kind of get those event informations as well as presentations. So if you see some presentations today, you're like, cool, I have something I want to showcase that's game dev related, let us know. We have a Google forum. You can message us in YouTube. We can message us in Discord. I'll put all that stuff in there. Any way that you want to contact us, just let us know, and we'll be sure to add you to the list of informations of what we can do for presenting in the future. Um, but yeah, so got a couple of announcements today, but just kind of a little bit of a breakdown. Let me go ahead and switch over to our presentation. All right, everybody see that okay? So again, it's February 26th today. It's a little bit of a picture of our group. We actually originally are, been doing groups like or events like this at the Idea Foundry, and we have a lot of really great folks here from a wide range of backgrounds and experiences and talents. So definitely take a chance to get to know us. We're really highly active in our Discord channel. So if you're ever interested in seeing what that's all about, I would probably say, see if I can actually get this ready for you all. And I'll put that in the chat. Yeah, definitely check us out on our Discord channel. That's probably one of the easiest ways to contact us at this point in time. You also have our email that you can contact us as well about any information about our group. And really, our goal is to help collaborate and to funnel game development opportunities here in Ohio, specifically the Central Ohio area. So Columbus, Ohio, for a lot of it, but as well as the Midwest, right? And we're open to other opportunities as well externally. So just let us know if you're like, hey, what is game development like around the area, or just in general. We're happy to help you. So let me kind of get into a little bit of our information. So we're a collection of game developers who want to help each other make games. That's essentially kind of our spiel. We collaborate with other groups like CCAD, Columbus State, OSU. I mean, that list isn't narrowed to that. There's Kent State, there's Miami University, there's Shawnee State. So a lot of these are schools, but we also work with other groups too, like the Cleveland Game Developer Group, which is actually a International Game Developer Association or IGDA chapter, which means they have a lot of different resources there that they can connect to other different game developer chapters around the U.S. So Brandon there's a really good guy to talk to, and then we also have the Cleveland game developer groups north of us. So a lot of those groups are really great to go to. If you want to see like all those different resources, just go to www.thecog.com right down there in the online information, and you can find more information about all our different groups. So you might have seen it. We are in March. So we every month we always do a careful review of how like our numbers are going, because like I mentioned before, we usually meet up at the Idea Foundry, which is a co-working space. We've been since the pandemic been doing everything online. March is still the same. I know that numbers are coming down, and we've been carefully looking at those. They've kind of been going up and down still a little bit, so we're still playing it safe just because we've got a lot of, because it's a public event, we got a lot of folks to kind of consider month to month, and we want to make sure that the return back is as safe as possible. So, but it's really great news. A lot of you have actually noted to us that it's kind of been a nice, carry through in online events because a lot of you couldn't make it to the in-person events. And that's not going to change no matter what the case. We're always going to have online events to some degree. Still kind of working to see how that works with like a hybrid action or whatever. And we'll talk more about that when it's more clear. But just so you know, like we're always going to have online events as well as in-person events because a lot of you seem to enjoy both, right? There's folks that can kind of make it out to our Columbus area and some of you that can't. So yeah, so we've got our prototype and play event. Which is the second Friday of the month. That's March 11th from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. That's actually in our Discord channel. If you're in our Discord channel with that link I just sent you, there is we call it PTNP for prototype and play. You'll see a text channel and a voice channel that you can message during that night just to kind of start off with. And then if you're interested in presenting your game in progress and or finished, or anything game development related, you just want some feedback, that's a great way to kind of get some initial like feedback from our group and just get people to take a look at your game. You can present your game for people to play. There are ways to do that. Just let us know. We can usually figure out something that might be useful for you. And sometimes we've used things like, I forget what it's called. There's Let's see if I can find it. Oh, yeah, we've used something in the past. Um, where is it? You always have a brain fart when you're kind of thinking of it. Parsec. Okay, Parsec is a great tool to use. We've got instructions in our prototype and play lobby room of how to use that. Basically allows you to access somebody else's computer's input so you can use their computer to play a game. So we have tools like that you can use. If you have something like a physical game or whatnot, and you're looking to you'll present that to some degree, let us know and we'll work it out and we'll try to figure out ways that could be useful for you. So Prototype and Play is a great event to go to. Our second event of the month is the Let's Play series. It's to be determined, but we kind of have an idea what we might want to do. Those are events where basically we have our other COG admin, Caleb, come in and do an event where we stream a game. Usually it's a game with a genre of some sort, so whether that's platformers, that's, last month was, I think it was asynchronous gameplay. I always forget. I know we mistaken exactly what it was, but basically allowed us to have two players play at the same time and kind of talk to each other. So that was a lot of fun. We did Um, a really neat puzzle game about two spies kind of going in and infiltrating, a building or a quest to kind of gather intel information of like a spy and an intel, person. So that was kind of fun to play those games, and those are all on our YouTube channel as well. So every third Sunday from 2 to 4 p.m. It'll be on March 20th this month. Sometimes that moves around depending on like availability slash just kind of where the last event pops up. So definitely stay tuned before you sign in to make sure it is that month. But this month should be pretty good. So yes, asymmetrical play. Thank you. I always forget exactly which one it was. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. And then our last event, last Saturday of the month, is the GameDev Meetup, just like this one. It's March 26th, and it's from 1 to 4 p.m. And we say till 4 p.m. We may not take up that entire time, but usually what we do is we do our announcements like you see here, and then we go in and do a presentation. So that might be one, that might be three, it could be a lot, who knows. And then after those, we close out and then invite everybody back into our Discord channel, in our voice channel under General, and just chat, just kind of catch up. Sometimes those evolve into gameplays. We've done like Among Us games, so those, co-op games or, PvP games, whatever we want to do, just a group event games. It could be kind of fun. So if you're interested in that, or if you just want to chat and catch up with folks, that's a great time to do that as well. Um, Let me see. So you're here to find out when we're going to start meeting in person. Yes. So um, I mean, it could be very soon. I know that's been a lot of questions. So I can tell you now, just in March, we're all online. Um, it just depends. Again, we're looking at the numbers very carefully. We're not having any particular, you know, um, identifier for that necessarily, but there are a couple things that we have been looking into to note that, but I don't want to give false information and then kind of like jumpstart things. So we will let you know ahead of time. That will definitely be the case. It will be a gradual meetup, um, and it will be kind of like we did last time. I think it was in 2021 where we did an event in July as kind of like a test. So we will let you know in advance, and if you want to know about what each month is like, just come to this event, and we'll let you know during the stream. So keep you posted as soon as possible as those things become live. But we do update every Game Dev Meetup, so if you're interested in seeing when we're going back in person, check that out, and we'll let you know during for the next month. Cool. So and then we've got someone else is saying you're a new developer, no game experience. What engine would you recommend for the first time? Was thinking Unity, but not sure. Yeah, our group tends to be Unity, as you kind of see some of these other different comments down below. But yeah, Unity definitely is pretty easy-ish, I would say. A pretty good engine to start with. Some people like Unreal as well. It's the way I kind of describe it is like Unreal and Unity. They're both 3D engines. Unity tends to be like not a lot of like tools in your face up front, and you can kind of add to them as you go. Where Unreal sometimes tends to be like all the tools available to you up front, and you kind of choose which ones you want to use. And you can also add more too. This is not saying everything's up front. But they're both very powerful tools. They can both make 2D and 3D games of all kinds of shapes and sizes, so to speak. So definitely, if you want to chat more, definitely chat in the YouTube channel as well as our Discord, and there's a lot of like experiences that you can kind of think about doing. Let me see if I may figure out anything else. Godot is another good one. Yeah, that's kind of been coming up. We actually had a lot of good talks there with our game dev or game jam. So, um, cool. Yeah, sweet. So you're working through there. Um, okay. So this is just some other stuff that I kind of mentioned before, just kind of switching the slide. We're still growing pretty well. Like it's kind of really cool to see everything. Our meetup page is almost at 2,000 members. Um, So that's really cool. So once we get there, I'm sure we'll do something really, really kind of fun there. We've been with, COG's been around for a long time. I forget how many years, probably oh, at least 10 years at this point, maybe even longer. But it's kind of one of those things that, it's kind of great to see everybody kind of, get together and kind of, come back and say hello to everybody, new and old, and kind of share their experiences so we can grow as a group. So we have everything, all our online resources. So the YouTube Live is for community events. Our Discord is for instant updates. Our official COG page is thecog.com, like I mentioned before. And the new thing that we're trying to get people to do more of is this. Oop, sorry. If you go to, oh, sorry, I'm like messing around too much. Um, if you go to thecog.com/games, um, you can do oh, I see. You can submit your game, whether it's finished or not, and it'll go to a Google Sheet. And I'll actually kind of show that now. I wonder if I can switch over. Yeah, I can do that. All right. So if I go to our website and go to COG Games at the top left corner, you'll see a list of our games right here on this page. We're looking to add more. Um, And if you want to add yours, all you have to do is select the Select Here button right here, or you can do Add My Game down here at the uh, top left one, the first card. And basically, it's just giving us your information. We'll put it right here with a little image. And then at any given time, just let us know if you want us to update that, and we can. So more than happy to update these things as well. But this is just kind of like a pool of games from COG. So definitely check them out if you want to see some of the games we have, and if you want to post them, let us know. We're definitely happy to help out there. So the cog.com has information about our contact information. It has, our team, a code of conduct, and a lot of really good information about other groups too. So if you're interested in like our Facebook page, YouTube channel, email, and other groups, there's a lot of, like you'd be surprised, there's a lot of different game developer groups too. So we try to keep this up to date and keep everybody posted. And you might notice there's a new tab up here for the Global Game Jam event. This happened at the end of January, which was a blast. We basically, they had like kind of like over a week to do the game jam this year. So if you're not familiar with Global Game Jam, it's usually like a 48-hour event. It still was for our site as well as other sites, but we decided to do the traditional like at the end of the month type of game jam. So it was January 30th through, or excuse me, 28th through the 30th. And basically we paired up with anybody interested in game jam or jamming with and making a game in 48 hours. Um, so we have our events, and we had a blast. We had our teams in Discord created. I think we had 3 teams this year. So and a lot of really good information. And the theme this year was duality, which was a lot of fun to kind of do. So if you get a chance and haven't had a chance to kind of play through some of these games, please do. There's some really good stuff in there. Um, and then you can basically go on the right side and see all the games, and that'll take you to a page that has all the games that were submitted. If you do have these games up and you do want to update them, at this point they aren't able to be updated because it's kind of too far out from the submission period. But feel free to use another tool like itch.io to upload progress of your games and get some up-to-dates about like your progress. I've seen a couple of you folks posting in our Discord channel where you had your teams developing the game some updates. That's a great way to keep things up to date and just keep doing some progress on those. And yeah, so I think it turned out really, really well. Sounds like everybody had a lot of fun. And we're looking to do another game jam coming up fairly soon for GDEX, which is the next thing I wanted to talk about. So for those of you who weren't familiar, GDEX is our annual Midwest Premier Gaming Expo. It's for game developers. We also have been we partnered last year for the first time with Origins Game Fair. We are still doing that this year. And this time around, we're actually aligning with what their schedules was like and just kind of what makes sense for their overall scheme of scheduling and whatnot. We're going to do the expo with them June 8th through the 12th. So that should be, I think, like a Wednesday, if I'm right. Yeah. Yep. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we'll be there the whole weekend doing some cool stuff. More information to some of the details, scheduling and whatnot. But what I can tell you now, the tickets are live currently, um, and the speakers are live. We are still working on volunteers and exhibitors, but those should be coming very, very soon. And we'll be doing the same thing as last year. So a lot of the COVID safety protocols. So you're probably pretty familiar with those at this point with any venue that you go to. And it will be at the Greater Columbus Convention Center. Knock on wood, with everything going well, which again they seem to be going well so far. Everything should be just in person there at the event with just things that are put in place to keep everybody safe and healthy. So definitely check this out if you are interested, and if you want to speak, like if you think you have some valuable information you can provide the game development community, you want to present, just go to that page and go down to the speaker application, and you should see more information there. So that kind of brings me to what I was talking about before. We have our prequel GDEX Game Jam, right? And I will tell you, right now we're still not 100% sure the dates, but if I had to give it a guess, because this is not up to date, so don't look at this yet. But um, we kind of call it almost like a casual game jam because it's a lot longer than 48 hours. Usually what we try to do is tie in 2 weekends. And for this year, we're looking to do May, I want to say it was 13th through the 15th because there's Memorial Day coming up the next week. So we're doing it a little bit earlier than usual, but that again, just so that everybody that wants to do it can do it. So it should be 13th, that Friday. We'll get that weekend, the whole week to do the game jam, plus the next weekend. So 13th through the 22nd should be when we're doing it. Don't let me don't confirm that and send it out yet, but we will update this page when everything is up to snuff and whatnot. Which is really cool because like this will be our third GDEX Game Jam, which is crazy to think about. This year is our special 10-year anniversary, as you saw on the front page. So a lot of cool stuff coming up with that, which will again let you know more information in the scheduling portion of this webpage. But yeah, that's the main things. Is badges are ready, speaker applications are ready, volunteers and exhibitor applications are coming soon, and GDEX Game Jam information is coming soon as well. Although I think that stuff will be coming in pretty soon because I think we'll just kind of be working away and getting that information up on the website. And we usually submit our Game Jams information on the Itch.io website as well because they have a really solid Game Jam tool that we can use and website information we can use there, and had a lot of fun there. So yeah, so definitely encourage you to do those game jams. There's a lot of them out there. This is just some of them that we're showcasing here today. But yeah, so that's what we got there. I just kind of want to do a shout out to some of our game developers. Last Sunshine is coming out in March, so planned release date is March 22nd. We'll be doing more information there. And just kind of with today's presentation, I always want to do a shout out to our presenters. So presenting today is Techo Studios with, they actually working on a game called Never End Neverland. We did actually a Let's Play series with Caleb and I playing through some of those first story elements, and had a lot of fun kind of playing through that. So if you get a chance to check them out, Never End Neverland, excuse me, is currently free to play, and then the Last Sunshine will be soon to play in March So keep an eye on that. Sweet. Okay, so let me just make sure I haven't missed anything. Alright, I'm gonna slideshow this. I'm gonna scan through the chats to make sure we don't have anything I'm missing. Cool. Alright, so there was a question about exhibitor information about GDEX, Assault, for 5-day attendance for Origins, but nothing on exhibitors and presenters. That information will come up soon. I'm actually not sure which they're going to do. I mean, it could possibly be the GDEX portion is 3 days, but don't quote me on that. So we will give you more information soon as those become more clear. So yeah, good question, because I know Origins naturally is a 5-day event. So we say the event is 5 days, but for exhibitors that could be different. That could be just the traditional Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So we'll keep you posted as we have more information. Again, the date's moving from a fall date to a summer date, so those things might change just a little bit. But for the most part, we'll keep you posted as soon as we find more information. So good question. Do exhibitors need to purchase the regular admission tickets as well for GDEX? Again, I gotta check with that, but it's to my understanding, just like we've done in years past, exhibitors will get admission um, with their table. Just like we did last year, you'll get a badge as for the floor and all the different events. And depending on the type of table you have, those things might change. Because we do have like smaller tables and larger tables. So we'll keep you posted on all that information soon. But usually in years past, yes, you would get a regular admission with your exhibitor badge or your exhibitor, your exhibitor badge would get you into other different regular admission. So keep you posted, and then as we get those information, you can decide, if it's like your booth only gets one, you know, exhibitor badge, maybe because it's a smaller booth or something like that, and you need more, then we can talk about. You can start to see what how many badges you would need if you want more people to do that. So, but yeah, we'll keep you posted. Good question. And yeah, I think that's it for now. As far as I can tell on GDEX, I'm going to double check, make sure nobody else had any other questions. A lot of really cool chats about game engines. I love it. Um, cool. And then we've done our announcements for today. I think that's what we wanted to showcase. And then we'll do a running announcement in with Adam today, again from Techo Studios. He's going to talk about narratives in games. So this will be a great breakdown for a lot of you, especially that are integrating narratives in your games, and just kind of taking a step to think about, okay, if I'm making a story-based game, like what are things I should keep in mind? And he'll kind of dive more into that. The last thing is I always like to leave everybody with a question of the month. We'll do this after the presentation, as we join back into Discord, and we'll say like, okay, what are some of your favorite tabletop games? Actually, get a lot of discussions in our channels about like, hey, you know, I'm making a physical game, a card game, board game, or whatever. And so there's a lot of you out there. So if I'm always curious, like, what is your favorite physical tabletop game if you have one? Or even if it's like D&D, I guess that would be tabletop, right? So what are some elements that you like about physical tabletop games, and what are things that you, find fascinating about them? So cool. And we'll talk about that. You can talk about that in the chat in YouTube, or you can talk about later in Discord. This is kind of a little bit of an icebreaker. So cool. Let me go ahead and switch back over to me. Bloop. Hello. And what I'm going to go ahead and do, and actually, I'm going to go ahead and switch something so I can make sure I got Adam ready. So give me one moment. I'm going to switch to this one. All right, all right, all right, all right. Cool. That was weird. Okay. Sorry about that. My mic just cut out for some reason. Fun shortcut keys. All right. Are you ready? So I'm getting Adam right now to see if they're ready to switch up. So give us one moment while we switch things over. Here, you like me to join? Sure. Cool. All right. Yeah. Let's all go into the live stream. So let me switch that over. All right. I've got one. I've got two. Sorry, it's a little cheesy.
All right, everyone, can I be heard?
You should be heard, but yeah, let us know if you do not hear um, Adam. I guess in some instances too, Caleb, because I think Caleb, you're jumping in too. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna switch to our 3 view, and let me switch back to our face view. Hey, there's more of us.
Hey.
Good, good.
Hi.
Hello, everybody. So yeah, this might be confusing for some of you who are like new here. And if you are new here, let us know because we want to talk to you. We want to get to know you. But for those of you who don't know faces with names, my top right, that's Adam, and then top
Hello.
top
Hi.
left is Caleb. And I hope that's right because sometimes they switch these things on stream. But yeah, I guess you waved, so we're pretty good to go. So, but yeah. So Caleb is one of the COG admins, and Adam is here today to talk about awesome narratives. So cool. So before we get into the live stream, what I wanted to do um, is give you some time, Adam, to talk about yourself and your experience, and with your studio and game with Techo Studios and your game, uh, Never in Neverland. So cool.
All right. I'll take the time. Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adam. We've been running since 2020, mostly out of Ohio, but we've worked with team members pretty much all around the world at online places as well, Canada, Britain, anywhere that speaks English, really. And worked on a few games. Our most recent game that we're working on right now is Never and Never. It's a pretty childish, cartoony adventure style game with puzzle mini games, a very narrative central focus, which I think is going to be important for my presentation. Writing engaging narratives in games. Now, I know a lot of you watching right now making games and thinking to yourself, well, my game's not really story focused. Game, it's not a visual novel, it's not an RPG. Is story really going to be that to what I'm making? I'm sort of here to convince you that it is important to what you're making, what kind of game you're making, and what form of narrative you want to be telling.
Cool. That's great. Yeah. Sorry about the little bit of it sounds like a little bit cut out on my end. Just I think it might be my stream just going in to overdrive.
Mm-hmm.
But um, yeah, should be pretty good. But yeah, that's really great because you and I had a chance to kind of chat a little bit. Looks like some people in the chat know you. Um,
Yeah, they put it out to the Teku Studios server, like,
yeah,
hey, I'm presenting on the cog, so.
that's cool. Sweet. Yeah, and we've been following you guys for quite a while at this point, and I think it's really great that you all are kind of creating your own your own studio, your own games, and it's really kind of awesome to kind of see it all kind of come to fruition. So there's a lot to be experienced in terms of like the learning process of these different applications. So both interested to hear about specifically like the game dev narrations, but further along if you want to talk about like your experience with your company and how it's growing and things to keep in mind, those are cool things too. So yeah, let's go ahead and
Hmm.
jump into it. And when you're ready, I'll go ahead and switch over to your presentation today about narratives in games.
All right, gotcha. I'll share the. Let me know if you could see that.
Yep, cool.
All right, so I have a quick Google Slide presentation to go. talking about today. Shouldn't be too awful long unless we talk for super long time, but I don't anticipate that happening. We'll see though. We'll see. All right, so this is just a slide, a little bit about myself. I know I spent a couple I'm the head of Teku Studios. We've created a few games, Fate, Zodiac, Never End Neverland. We're working on a big Kickstarter project right now for Neverland, so I'll have more to share about that when that's ready. I've written for a lot, even outside of video games. I wrote and directed a live musical a couple of years ago. I've written for animated shows, and of course, I've written for live action stuff, and I've written for video games as well. So it's going to be important to explore the differences in storytelling between like a TV show or live action theater, for example, and a video game. But stories for both of those are going to be very different experiences. I'm also an artist and I've led production for many games, as I said, among other things, a lot of stuff. But as of right now, I'm the head of a game company, so exciting, I gotta admit. Now let's get straight into our. Is story even important for most games? I mentioned this question earlier.
James,
go on.
One moment, since we are experiencing some reduced quality. Do you have the options when you're streaming to reduce the feed from, I think it was 1080p. We want to reduce it to 720. If you can do that, that might help with the stream, as it is definitely cutting out.
Gotcha. You mean the screen share itself?
Yeah.
All right. Fix that real quick.
So I think if you can either change it, I think in the stream, or if you unstream and restream.
Yeah, when you close it and then when you open it again, you should have an option to set the quality settings.
Yeah.
All right. The quality settings. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah. It's just the baby's struggling. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Such are the risks of presenting through Discord.
That's okay. Oh, okay. It's
all right.
Seems to be better. Let's try this to see if it works. Go ahead.
All right. Let's move back into our first question. Even important for most games. Most games aren't necessarily story-based, as you would call it. Of course, it's important. Having a narrative doesn't always mean like characters with 3-act structures and lots of cutscenes. That's not really what a video game means most of the time. Whether you're working on a game focused on dialogue, character moments, or a game focused on action, having an overarching narrative might think it keeps the game flowing, it keeps the game cohesive, understandable. Mario Golf and Mario Tennis, for example, right? Those are sports games that have functioned for almost decades without story modes. But in their most recent incarnations, they have pretty lengthy campaigns. And not only can those campaigns be a way to expand your game scope in a way.
All right, sorry, James or Adam. I'm gonna ask you one more time. Would you be able to, since we're focused on the presentation, could you turn off your camera, and that might help as well.
Gotcha.
I'm doing stuff on my end too, but.
Wes, I'm gonna just drop off so that you don't have to have my stream coming in too.
Sure, that's fine.
All right, let me know if that works. Apologies for the technical issues.
Yeah. Seems to be. I think that's the best we can do too. So let's try this out for a little while.
All right.
Love your avatar.
Did you hear this?
Way.
Thanks. It's the main character of our next.
Yeah. It's still a little bit, but let's just see how it goes, and we'll see if we need to change things. But go ahead. Sorry.
So now that we've clarified that story is important, how important is it actually? That sort of depends on what kind of game you want to be making. We've got 3 major types of story that go into video games. We've got a primary story, which is a story in a video game where people are playing for the story. People are playing to experience the story. These are commonly RPGs, visual novels, slower games where you can get those character moments and play for the story, experience the story first and foremost. And since the story is the most important part of a primary story game, You can have be any genre you want, and that can affect the tone of your game and pretty much everything else. Like a comedy story, sci-fi, action, epic, horror game, anything between. You could do a lot of different stuff with a primary story game. It's not just limited to the novel type of trope. This is probably the most common type in games, especially if you get AAA type games. This is a secondary story next. Long or expansive story is here, but it's going to take a back to the gameplay or other elements of the game. Commonly, these are games, fighting games, shooters with story modes, MMOs, stuff like that. A secondary story is usually used as a side attraction of sorts. This long story that adds to the game, makes the game better. At the same time, you're not playing Pikmin for the story, you know? You're not playing Metroid. You're playing for the gameplay mechanics or the art style, or normally it's something other than itself. Lastly, we've got tertiary story, like Mario, Sonic the Hedgehog, Save the Princess type of story. The short, simple narrative meant to contextualize the game. Why is this happening? Why does it look like this? Why is my enemy my enemy? Stuff like that. This is commonly for casual stuff, platformers, puzzle games, that. All right, let me know if that sounds any better.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's a way. I mean, I don't know if there's a way to even reduce the quality even a little bit more. We could try on streaming and do something less than 720. Yeah.
All right.
I mean, the internet over here is fine. I don't know if it's just coming through that way or not. It's a bummer.
I can move down the stream a little bit. See what I can do. It's on the lowest settings right now at the moment.
It's 480. Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'll continue on if that's all right.
Yep, go ahead.
Uh, Now this slide is about what makes a good video game story, apart from a good book story, because there are plenty of key differences when it comes to good novel or writing a really good video game dialogue script. One of the most important things you're going to look for is player immersion. Since the player is directly controlling one or more of characters in the game, they're going to want to like they're part of the world. They want to feel like the world endless. Not necessarily that the world is endless 99% of the time. It's not going to be. They want to feel like they can interact with everything happening. And that moves into my next point, which is even if your game's narrative doesn't have branching paths, different endings, stuff, the player should still feel like they are the ones progressing through the story. I used a photo of Mortal Kombat here. Say the player is playing as, which is, I believe, in Mortal Kombat often hero character, and the enemy is Scorpion. The player defeats Scorpion, then the enemy team, Shao Kahn, is going to have to come up with a plan. Now, even though defeating Scorpion was a scripted event that was always supposed to happen, the player is still the one instigating that event. They don't want to be watching a story happen in a video game. They want to be the one moving it forward. Lastly, we're going to have synergy with the game. This is probably the most important aspect. Your game's narrative should flow with and the gameplay, the sound design, art direction, everything should make sense with the narrative and bounce off of it in a positive way. Well, you're probably not going to write a story about becoming a better actor and learning to be well adjusted against crowds at your local comedy club in a game with person shooting mechanics, for example. I know that's a pretty extreme, but the point is you want your story to play into your game's mechanics, sound, everything else.
That's cool. Actually, I was just gonna say it seems like the audio is just me for some reason at Discord, but it sounds like people are actually doing pretty well in the live stream. So if you want to go back up to 720, that's probably fine. So
All
my
right.
my computer's funny. So yeah, you're doing great. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of really good information. Like I think there's a good note on this slide where it's apart from a movie, your book, it's good to think about your target audience, but also your medium, because there's a lot of different things you can do in games specifically for narratives. So it's really cool to kind of see like what makes a good game could be different from a game to a book, right? And there are a lot of things to keep in mind for that. So
Mm-hmm.
cool.
Yep, there are definitely differences. Just as there would be differences between book, every time you add a new creative aspect to media, it's going to change how everything is made. So let's hop into some ways people tell stories in games. Not necessarily through dialogue, but other ways people are going to be going through their narrative in their video games. This first one's going to be environmental storytelling. This is a pretty common thing in most games. Whether your game's story is a main focus or not, environmental storytelling can add a lot of believability to the world. It's going to make it seem more real, more nuanced, things like that. And when you get to games like Subnautica Below Zero or Pokemon Legends Arceus, you can observe creature behavior. You can observe their lifestyles. You can see how everything plays out in the game. You can see how everything moves in the world. And just observing things like that is a form of environmental storytelling. Just watching something happen instead of it being explained to you through dialogue boxes or through cutscenes. That's going to be a lot more engaging for a player because they're the ones finding this information instead of the information being presented to them, if that makes sense. All right, I'm looking at a few messages right now.
It sounds like we might be better. I don't
I hope
know what
so.
changed. So
I
yeah,
hope
keep
so.
keep going,
Great.
keep going.
All right.
Yeah, knock on wood, no more audio as it drops. We'll see. Knock on wood.
Mm-hmm. All right, here we got the old saying. I'm sure you've heard it before when it comes to movies and stuff like that. Show, don't tell. It's repeated plenty often in storytelling, I guess philosophy, the rules of storytelling. Except in this case, it's more like play, don't show, right? One thing people complain about all the time, you're going to get these excessive cutscenes, long-winded dialogue, especially in these new AAA games that want to seem as cinematic and epic as possible. But oftentimes you're going to find gamers want engaging gameplay as opposed to these long drawn out story moments. You know, if people wanted to watch something, they just watch something. They wouldn't be playing the game. They're holding a controller, they're waiting for the moment where they can make a choice or where they can interact with things. Obviously, story focused games are going to have a lighter interactive element than more action oriented games, but try to always make sure that players are playing the game. You know, players want to interact. Players are sitting at a couch, holding a controller, paying attention for the point where they can make a choice. And normally it's time based. You don't want to go too long before you reach another interactive section of the game or some kind of interactive element. Visual novels are tricky with this oftentimes because you can go 30, 40 minutes scrolling through dialogue and then you get to make a choice. That's probably not ideal. You probably want to put those dialogue choices or any other kind of interactive element as close to each other as possible. You never want to go too long without one. Now, here's a few examples of narrative consistency in games, or how narrative consistency can go wrong. If your story doesn't make sense, your game's not gonna make sense. try not to leave your game story behind as just like an afterthought. Oh, I'll design all these levels, and then I'll figure out a way to link all these levels together later on, once the levels are already concepted or done. Even if your narrative doesn't take center stage, having a nonsensical story, it's going to result in the game feeling disjointed. It's going to feel like a bunch of levels just pasted together, which essentially is how you would have made it in this situation. So you want to think about the way your levels or your sections in your game are going to connect narratively as you are making the sections. It's probably a bad idea to leave that for the post development. Games like Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric, games like Devil's Third, for example. I know they're bad for plenty of other reasons besides their narrative, but narratives do not help these games. When you play a game like Devil's Third, you're going to be wondering, why am I in Russia now? Why am I in India now? Why am I hacking and slashing these guys? It's not going to make sense, and the game itself is going to feel disorganized. It's going to feel like a mess.
Yeah, and I know that we were talking about that one quite a bit, and it's really kind of interesting because games are, they're an interactive play, right? So a lot of times, and it's not unwarranted to do this, but like you want to, get the gameplay working, and you want to make sure that looks and feels great. Like, a Sonic adventure game is, a lot of times platformer elements, so you want to make sure those are great. But there are definitely some Sonic games that work well, and we were even talking about some games like Sonic Adventure, for example. 1 and 2 kind of had some neat story elements, and some that are just like, okay, we've got this level, and then you're going to go to the next level, and it just doesn't. It can kind of confuse things rather than help support the core mechanics of the game. And so those are the things to
Mm-hmm.
keep in mind, right? Like there are ways to combine both. It's definitely challenging. But if you kind of see the whole roadmap of where your game's going, you can interlude those things later. But you made a good point. You don't want narratives to elements to be an afterthought. It definitely becomes more challenging at that point to get those things to work when you're trying to say, cool, I've got this goofy green slime character, and I don't know what their backstory is. I don't know what they do, but I know that they slime things up and make things crazy, slippery for their enemies, right? Which is cool, but like you gotta kind of think about like if you want a narrative, which that probably would be cool to have one for that kind of character, that you should think about those
Yeah.
ahead of time, right?
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't need to be like some extensive backstory. They don't need to have like uh family trauma or anything super narrative extensive, quote unquote. When you get a character like Sonic or Mario, that makes a lot more sense. Why is Sonic running to the right side of the screen saving animals? All
Right.
you really need is a paragraph of explanation for that. But that paragraph of explanation means a lot more to that game's consistency than you might think it does.
Yeah. And I might make a comment for the next page, but like the extent to which you can, put narrative notes in your game, uh, can widely range, right? It can be short, it can
Hmm.
be long. A lot of times it's shorter because you got to think your player is sitting there with a controller or a mouse and keyboard or whatever, waiting to interact at some point. So it's great to read or even have dialogue or whatever, but at some point you got to bring back in that interactive element. So that's that balance in terms of the consistency of adding in narratives to your game. So yeah,
Of course, yeah.
it's cool stuff.
And especially if you're working on an action type game, you're going to be looking for other ways to put in your narrative. You're going to be looking for other ways other than boring dialogue to tell players what's up.
Yeah,
And another way you could do that is storytelling in visual design. Your game's art can help tell this narrative. So, for example, we can look at a picture of Link. This is just, I believe, his concept art. Maybe it's from the box art from Legend of Zelda 1. This is the first time players are seeing this character, probably ever, unless they saw him on TV, maybe. And you could look at Link, and you could tell a lot about both him and the game he's from. He has elf ears. He has a floppy green hat. He has a tool belt, knee-high boots. These are signs that okay, this character's probably from a traditional fantasy world, which Legend of Zelda is set in and has been set in for a long time. He's carrying a sword. He's got arrows and a bow on his back. He's got a ladder, a shield. You can infer from these points that, oh, I'm probably going to be using the sword in the game. That's probably going to be important. And you could take that even to other items on his person, like the book. He's got a key around his neck. He's got a flute in his belt, stuff like that. All of these things are used in the game and are part of this sort of item collecting mechanic that the original Zelda was sort of all about.
Yeah, and even to add to that, we were just talking about that book and his little tunic.
Hmm.
That's actually a really important part of that game in particular, and in games in general, is UI. Because a lot of times, definitely you want a UI to be simple enough to kind of use, but you can also use it as you're putting here as a visual element, right? Like it's almost like a booklet map when you open up the main menu to access your inventory
Hmm.
items. And that's really kind of neat. It speaks to like, the journey that Link is going out to the world to open up their map and seeing where they are, seeing what items they have, seeing what, all this information is. And it speaks to this exploration and discovery element that is so heavily structured in that game as its core foundation that it supplements to the gameplay. I've seen sometimes where, they always talk about like, what is it? Uh, there are some games that try to minimize UI to allow the cinematic of the gameplay to come to the forefront. I think you showed one from like The
Hmm.
Last of Us. They do a lot of that where
Hmm.
it's like you're trying to remove but then still have subtle cues of elements that represent gameplay, um, but don't take away from the kind of cinematic quality of that game, like an almost theatrical movie version of that game. So there's a lot of
Hmm.
things to keep in mind in that in terms of UI as well that can kind of really help to supplement the narrative, depending on how you want to take that approach. So yeah,
Hmm. And one thing I wanted to bring up that we were talking about a little bit earlier is the sort of famous Resident Evil backpack inventory mechanic,
yeah,
right?
yep,
The very famous piece of UI that it adds to the story and it also plays into the game's mechanics. Remember earlier when I was talking about you want your narrative to synergize with your game mechanics. And Resident Evil does a great job at doing that for the most part. When it comes to the backpack mechanic, you're frantically shuffling everything around, trying to fit everything that's important in your inventory, in your backpack, and deciding what may not be as important because you can't carry everything. And that adds to this survival horror of the game.
yeah. It's almost kind of funny because you could have an unlimited amount of inventory system, but Resident Evil's like, look, let's be real. Let's not be like Link that has dozens of
Hmm.
different items. You only have so much that you can hold, and you have to kind of fit those items in those sections, which is really fascinating. But yeah, it's kind of cool. Folks are saying, narrative. The narrative screen helps, too, as Turret Views was saying in reviews. So that definitely does kind of take into effect. Um, and then the artist 808 was saying the story relates to a motif, a centralized theme. Yeah, so that could be colors, that could be font type, that could be just how things are placed on screen. So it's really
Hmm.
kind of neat to see how those things kind of work, whether it's UI or characters or the environment. I think you were even talking about that before, right? Like what is in the environment that can describe a narrative, right? Is this
Hmm.
a futuristic sci-fi post-apocalyptic world? Is it Pickman where it's cartoony, but maybe it's like moving around in a space that is an alien planet? Um, those things can
Hmm.
kind of describe not only the story behind this, but as well as the style of the game. Is it playful? Is it fun? Is it like really crunchy and you kind of got to get in and really kind of fine tune like where you're navigating in the world? Environments can kind of do that too. So Yeah.
Hmm. All right. Another thing I wanted to touch on real quick is the silent protagonist. This is a pretty common trope in video games. You're going to see it a lot with RPGs, Earthbound, Undertale, Amori, games like that. And having your main character be silent is it can be tempting. There are reasons to do it, but it's important to remember why and how you would use a silent protagonist. With a silent protagonist, instead of the main character being the central focus, it becomes the player that is the central focus. Because since the player is supposed to essentially be the character has no personality traits. That's why they're silent. They are essentially a blank slate because the player is going on the adventure, not the main character. So, because of this, instead of the main character growing and evolving throughout the story, the player is supposed to grow and evolve throughout the story. This can honestly be really tough to write because it's difficult to properly convey that type of change to the player and get them to legitimately believe that they have changed because they experience the story instead of the main character, if that makes sense. If you write it sort of poorly, if you're writing a poorly written silent protagonist, it's going to come off as bland or uninteresting if their character changes aren't effectively relayed to the player.
Yeah, it's kind of at a risk, right? Because in some instance, silent protagonist is used to kind of allow for the player to feel immersed as that character in the game. But at the same time, it's really uh, easy or sometimes common to see the silent protagonist kind of, allude to a certain character type that the player may not relate to, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's really tricky because you have to give it some flavor, so to speak, so that it can be able to move through um, the the plot and the events in the game. But you can't give it too much because otherwise it might be like, well, that's not me at all. Like, it's always kind of funny because I always think of Link. He's got his grunts and his ha and his hooah, and I'm just like, well, yeah. There are people like, why doesn't he talk? I was like, well, I mean, I can kind of get why they want to, make Link not talk and speak because they want some people to feel like they're the ones moving around. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's a careful balance because some other people might be like, well, maybe I don't identify as Link sometimes is a little bit androgynous at times, sometimes leaning more towards a male character, and it might be like, well,
Mm-hmm.
what if it would be a female character, right? I mean, there's a lot of female characters
Mm-hmm.
out there that play a lot of different Zelda games, and I think that is something to keep in mind too. Is how can you reach out to you know a broader range of players so they can experience the amazing like narratives that you've built for them. So I think it's very,
Mm-hmm.
very important to consider those things, whether it's like a smaller instance of narrative elements in your game or larger, like something like these two games tend to be more larger narrative based because when you're
Mm-hmm.
bringing in characters to these games, the player is going to relate to them to some degree, and so it's important to keep those things in consideration. So
Yeah. And speaking a little bit more on that identifying and relatability topic, oftentimes when you see silent protagonists, you see character customization tagged along with it. And that's just another way to make the player feel like they are the main character. Instead of they're controlling the main character, they are supposed to be the main character. So when you see games like, I believe I guess The Sims would be a really good example of like creating your own stories or narratives if you wanted to do that. Any RPG with character customization at the start, even if you can name your own character. The original Legend of Zelda, for example, a lot of those old NES and SNES RPGs, obviously they didn't have the technology for super like dozens of hair colors and eye colors type of character customization, but a lot of them just had you naming the character.
yeah.
And a lot of times naming the character was a way to like improve the silent protagonist and make it work a
Yeah.
lot better.
Yep. Yeah. And we've got some folks saying, um, I know Andrew's been doing like a text-based venture game, and he was talking about how like he doesn't prefer the silent protagonist, and I think if you don't have a silent protagonist, so to speak, it has its benefits too. It's like you're not really trying to create a broad uh, environment or narrative. You're just trying to tell a story, right? And whether
Mm-hmm.
that character, like some people may want to play as that, right? Like some people might want to play like, I always liked some characters that normally aren't my own character type, I guess you would say, because it's kind of fun to be like, what if I was like, an astronaut or something like that? Like that might be something I may never be able to do. But if I
Mm-hmm.
could play as someone who's like, trained and has the ability to do those kind of crazy things in space, like I think that's great. It gives me a chance to kind of move out of my normal day-to-day routines and try something new. Um, so
Mm-hmm.
there are pros and cons to both, but there are definitely things to keep in mind. Um, yeah,
Yeah, most stories probably wouldn't work with a silent protagonist. The issue with it is you have to design the entire story around a silent protagonist. You have to go in on day one and be like, I'm gonna have a silent protagonist, and you have to be really good at designing around that. Because so many times I and probably many others have seen like sometimes the silent protagonist idea doesn't work out and it actively hurts the narrative and it hurts the game to have a silent protagonist. It's a negative.
yeah,
So it ends up having the opposite effect of alienating the player instead of bringing them further into the world.
yeah. You get this almost weird out of experience moment, which is the things you should try to avoid as much as possible in games. Is like what takes you out of the gameplay. It's like I call it the Dora the Explorer asks you question moment, where you're just sitting there and there's
Hmm.
like dead silence. It's almost like that when you've got this breadth of environment with all these talking narrative characters speaking about their dreams and ambitions and their place in the game, and then they talk to you as the protagonist, and it's like, what do you think? And you're just like either speaking in text, which is totally fine, for the most part, or you speak like Link and it's just grunts and head shakes, and you're like, why won't they say more? Aren't they you know, empowered
Hmm.
to make, choices and decisions. Yeah, and it's kind of funny. Artist was saying their favorite silent protagonist is Doomslayer. I don't know if I played that one, but now that you mentioned that, I'm gonna have to try to check that out.
I
'Cause
mean, as far as I'm aware, Doom does not have a super intense narrative. It's not you're not playing Doom to sit through dialogue.
oh yeah,
So
you,
I think
you
the silent protagonist for Doom especially works really well because the character speaks with its actions, and you feel like you're slaying hordes of demons with a giant gun or whatever other weapon you choose to use.
yeah, it's almost like the strong silent type, right? So it's the
Hmm.
very macho character that's just like, I don't speak because I don't need to. I just do. And I think that's why it's kind of
Hmm.
funny in that instance. You're kind of leaning on that. I'm not saying that the macho type characters always need to be the strong silent type. I think there could be other roles that allude to why someone might be silent, but that might be a good way to integrate a silent protagonist is because of the character's type, right? Maybe it's because they're timid and frightened of the world and they're going through this world that's challenging. And so maybe they are could even be mute, right? That could be interesting. Um, you're giving reason to why they don't speak a lot. And I think that plays a stronger role in how to integrate these types of mechanics in your game to create a more seamless and consistent narrative for your characters. Um, so that's something to keep in mind is if your character's not speaking, maybe try to write in even to something small why they don't speak. Because I mean, even if it doesn't, you're like, it doesn't really matter. It kind of doesn't, but also your player is going to ask that question. Because again, if it's not answered, it's what takes them out of the game. They're like, oh, okay. But yeah, it's really interesting to kind of think about more. I'd love to see more silent type Doom Slayer games for sure. So cool.
Yep. All right. And this is the last slide just for some closing points, real quick, on this presentation. Narrative is important. to basically every game. I can't think of too many games off the top of my head that aren't from like 80s arcades that don't have some sort of narrative influence or some kind of backstory or contextual explanation for why everything is going down. I believe in Pac-Man, contextual story for a while, the very original Pac-Man. I forget what it was, but I'm pretty sure there's a reason for what's going on there. So, as games evolve further and further from that point, players are going to expect more engrossing experiences. What might have worked in 80s and 90s arcades probably wouldn't work as well now. So, what you're going to want to do is at the very least contextualize everything. You want to make sure your game makes sense. You want to make sure your game and your world has an explanation for what's going on, even if it's not more than like a paragraph. You just want to make sure people get it. Next, you're going to want to determine how important is my story? Are people playing for the story? Do I want character arcs? Do I want like act structures? All this stuff that normally comes with story-based mediums? Or do I just want like, here's what's going on, jump to the right of the screen? You know what I mean? And if you're going in with the expectation, I'm going to tell this story, I'm going to make this world feel real, you're going to want to use stuff like environmental storytelling. You're going to want to put the narrative in your character designs, in your environment designs, even in your gameplay mechanics. Those should also help get your story across. That can especially help if you're trying to avoid dialogue or cutscenes. You can find other ways to get that information across. So, thanks for listening. Thank you, Wesley, and the COG for letting me present today. Hopefully this sparks some ideas for you.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of really cool like things to keep in mind. I think it's it is interesting, right? Because we think about like almost the old 16-bit, 8-bit arcade 80s era of games, video games, to be less narrative, although they definitely had narratives to them. And I think that as they grew, like we talk about the multitude of different Pac-Man games, they did have more you know narrative elements, and it kind of almost organically kind of surfaced as they grew because they're like, what else can we add, and why are they doing this, and how are they moving through? Because that's what makes games so interesting, as I think they do in some instance for books and for movies, is they want to add more to it, and one way to do that is through narratives. So like Pac-Man had Miss Pac-Man, right? So we're like, okay, cool, how's that work? And why are there ghosts there? And why are there cherries? And some instance, some of those elements on the surface don't really matter, but as the game grows, it is kind of a unique and interesting way to add more to the game in another different direction that kind of brings in more players to your game, right? I mean, there's a lot of elements to this too. You could argue that music is kind of the same way. You can say like just depending on the game type and the target audience, you could add other different types of elements. But it's kind of almost nowadays, and we actually were talking about this with one of the games we were reviewing during prototype and play, is they actually had two trailers for their game coming out. One was gameplay and one was literally just story with no gameplay at all. And it brought up a good like discussion, is like that might be something to consider for your game, is maybe you want
Mm-hmm.
both. Because you're going to have some people who are like, what draws me in first, right? And some people it is, I just want to know what the gameplay's like. There's people like, where's the trailer with the gameplay? I mean, the visual cutscenes are cool, but like, what am I going to be playing at the end of the day? And some people are like, oh wow, this looks really neat. Like you've got my interest. Like what else about that character? What else about that environment? That's really cool. You have orcs. I love orcs. Like that's pretty neat. That kind of stuff. Like I look here and I'm like, I want to see like what that spiky cactus thing is, right? And why
Mm-hmm.
why are they so happy but so prickly? So, um, yeah, I think those things speak to people differently, and the more people that you can have to play your game, the more that they can bounce those ideas off, and I like to watch YouTubers stream games. They talk about the lore, right? What's the lore of the game? And it's so much on the smaller surface at times because games kind of, tend to have like only so much they can cram pack into an experience, but they do dive deep when people are wanting to learn more about a game. Having those elements, in the background, even for people who want to learn more about the game or figure out what's coming up in the next game, narrative is a great way to pave that road. I know we did a lot of writing for No Mercy, which is our platformer 2D side scroller game, and it's like I'm talking like hundreds of pages of like this and background and that. And what it did for us by having that, even though we're not adding in a book to our game necessarily, is it gave us a platform and a foundation to write other different levels and scenes and monster types into our game later that people can find interesting. And they're like, wow, that's why we went to that house or why that monster, changed the way they did. And that's what like kind of makes them exciting and interesting, right? Rather than just being like, cool, here's a red balloon that you pop. Awesome. Why
Mm-hmm.
is it red? Like people are going to ask that.
Why am I, yeah, like why is this balloon floating? Why am I popping it? Stuff like
Right.
that.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
One example I'd like to bring up of a game that I think does the whole optional storytelling very well is Overwatch. There's
Yeah.
so much lore there. There's so much character detail. There's so much to the world that you're playing in, but at the same time, almost all of that is optional, right?
Yeah.
You could play hundreds of hours of competitive Overwatch and get none of that and still have a great time. Or if you wanted, if you're interested in what these characters are like and what they do in their respective towns and respective worlds, you're going to look further into that. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I think that, as you're speaking to it, it's you know, a lot of folks might, want to learn more about it, and you talked about Overwatch. I was actually like, ah, man, I don't know about this game when it first came out because they had, I mean, to me, I'm more like I love narratives. That's just me. I grew up with playing Myst and just kind of reading through those books and discovering these different worlds and different characters. That's what interests me. I'm not saying a game is good because of that or not, but like that's what I look for in a game because that's what my interests are. So when I saw Overwatch and they just released their first trailer and it was all these different characters, one was like a sniper, one could teleport through time, and one, was a big gorilla. I was like, what is going on? I have no idea what this game is about. It looks cool, but and I'm sure the gameplay is interesting. I won't know until I play it, but I'm like, this game is all over the place. And then they did a lot with what they did with like Team Fortress, where they released character stories. And I was like, oh, that's why they're like that. Okay, that makes sense. That speaks to why their skill sets are like this or that. And I was like, that was really important for me because otherwise, I'd be like, I don't know why I'm playing the gorilla character. Why would I want to play them? It just doesn't make sense to me. But
Mhm.
then you can like, oh, once I get to understand their story, that makes sense. So, yeah, I think it's kind of fascinating because somebody might be like, well, I'm glad you showed me just the gameplay because that looks awesome. I know the story's going to be cool. So let's just kind of get into that. And so I think people will approach them differently. So it's always good to at least consider both gameplay and narrative. So, um, Shia was actually asking, what was your narrative design process for Never End Neverland?
Never End Neverland was an interesting narrative design process because I'll just say this right out. The two characters you see on screen are both from Never End Neverland. One on the left, Amber, that's the main character. One on the right is Prickles. He's a cactus, and they can't move. They're stuck in a pot. So when we get to a game like Never End Neverland that has so many unique looking locations and unique looking characters, looking at these two characters specifically, why is Amber like a freaking bunny rabbit, That's weird. Why is Prickles a literal cactus with a face on it, right? So the way to go about connecting everything with Never End Neverland was okay, I'm going to find a way to make this character and this character and this character, they might share the same art style, but they look vastly different. So I knew going into the game, players are going to be like, well, that's weird. Why is this bunny rabbit girl talking to a human teenager boy? Right? And so we opened the section, we opened the game with a section that explains everything, I hope in an engaging way. But I opened with a section with, if you remember, Pepper, the old man, the old puppet man. He's there to basically provide the backdrop for the game. Here's where you are. Here's who you are. Here's why you're here, and here's what you're doing. And finding a way to get that across to the player as quickly as possible, but also not drowning them in exposition, I think is a really important balance to get right. Because you don't want the player questioning what's happening. They always want to have a mission, they always want to know what they're doing and why they're doing it. But at the same time, you don't want to drown the player in text boxes that last for 20 minutes. So it's a difficult balance to get.
Yeah,
At least that was my.
it's almost like, telling a joke and explaining it is not as funny as, kind of giving them the appropriate amount of information for them to get it themselves. Same thing
Mhm.
like, magic tricks, right? Like you don't want someone to see a trick, for what it is. It's more interesting to think about how the trick kind of uh, misled you, and like how does that work? It's like it's got to be magic. Narratives can be that way too, as books and movies can. It sparks the imagination. It helps you kind of imagine a world that's like that and try to figure out how that works. And by doing that, it's just by connecting subtle things that we know in real life. It's like it's both in the sense of like what is realistic, like The Last of Us, like what would a world look like if it was all taken over by, zombies or whatever, and how do characters
Mhm.
interact with that, as well as something like this where it's like, okay, so these characters aren't anything we'd ever see in our world, most likely. If they did,
Mhm.
oh man, we'll see
If
how
they
that
did
world's
so,
like.
the scientific world would freak out.
But people ask that question, right? If they did, how
Mhm.
would it work? And that's what I found really fascinating about the introduction of this game is you have a character that explains why they're like this and why they're so different. And I think that's really important because then it gives it uh, like a viable presence to have those characters so strange and so weird. And that's what's kind of cool. It's like, well, if that's the case, what else can you do? I just want to be a rock. Like you could have that, and you could have that in if you play the game, you kind of realize there are reasons why these characters look like these different character types, and it's kind of then fun to be like, cool, this is how this world exists, this is what's in this world, what other characters could be in here? And I think that's kind of the fun part of it, is like, I wonder what else can kind of come from this and how these things connect, and you kind of look for those things, which tends to be kind of a neat discovery as you go through the game. So, and that's what's kind of cool is your story is, you said it's at three episodes at this point, and you're working on a fourth one.
Mhm. Yep,
S-
we've got 3 chapters out at the moment, and we're working on the 4th and last chapter. Hopefully, it'll be released in next month, though that's not really confirmed. We'll see. We're hoping though.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, we'll be sure to kind of help you guys out, promoting that too, because I think it's always kind of cool to kind of get the next one out. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, cool. Well, awesome. I think this was a really great, conversation. I think we got a lot of, really cool topics. It sounds like a lot of folks, um, Artist was talking about the video game story. Chrono Trigger was really one of their favorites because of how it uses structure. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of neat, like just kind of seeing how these things influence us. Definitely gameplay and game mechanics are really important in games, but I always feel like sometimes narratives accidentally get pushed on the wayside in terms of priority. But at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, if a player is going to play this game and they're gonna want to know why I've got a bunny girl character in this game. you're gonna have to kind of give something up to kind of explain that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Yep.
that you should try to, at least to some degree, try to figure out how that fits in the grand scheme of things. I'm gonna kind of look through the chats to make sure I'm not missing any questions. Um, but cool. While I mentioned that, is there anything else you want to do a shout out? Things coming up? You said the game hopefully is coming up next month for episode 4. Is there anything else coming out with your studio, or just anything you want to do as last note before we sign off for
Uh,
the day for this
yeah, I
presentation?
suppose.
Yeah.
As we've got as we've got Never End Neverland Chapter 4 coming out, it is the last chapter in the story and the last chapter of the game that needs to be developed. After that comes out, the game will officially be out of early access and it will probably be a paid experience, so get it now if you want it free. Just saying. Uh and after that, we've got some pretty big plans. Never End Neverland was basically a project just made by a few folks in a Discord who wanted to make this cool game in this cool world, and Teku Studios is the way in which we do that. But now we're going to be taking it to the next level after Never End Neverland is done. We've got a big project in the works called Sugar Creek. It is a sort of cross, if I can explain it, it's sort of a cross between Undertale and Fire Emblem. I think it's going to be really interesting to explore, and we're planning a pretty big Kickstarter campaign for that, which should be going live soon after Never End Neverland finishes. Very excited for that.
Yeah, it sounds really cool, and I must appreciate it too, because it's kind of neat that we have these kind of like homebrew like games being made, and appreciate you like putting your game out there, and it kind of makes sense. It's like your is this your first title game that your company is making, or are there other ones?
Uh, Never End Neverland is the third title under Teku Studios. There are
Okay,
two others, both of which were mostly just made by myself, though.
yeah,
Never End Neverland was the first attempt for me at least to take the company into a larger space, work with some more people, and get the games to a larger scope than just myself working essentially for free would be capable of.
yeah, yeah, and you can do that too, and I think it's always good to make it easy for people to give you feedback, especially in the beginning, because that isn't a learning experience for yourself as well. So it's a much appreciated in a sense that you're basically getting your game out there for our group to play, and excited to see, from what you learned in this experience, the game that coming out next. You said Sugar Creek.
Sugar Creek, yeah,
Yeah,
it's a fake town in Washington.
that's cool. Yeah, no, it's exciting stuff because I always think it's kind of neat. Like I said, there's these little tight knit games kind of being created, and the experience is open for communities like this to kind of play and give feedback as you start to push them to their next level as they get to the next part of their the next game or the next part of their game being created to a more finalized piece. So cool.
Hmm.
Yeah, it sounds like artist 808 wants to do a talk in the Kickstarter when it's done. So if you get that and you kind of share your experience, that would be really cool. We always like to see how things go because depending on what game you're looking to release, either it's a crowdfunding campaign like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, or
Hmm.
pushing to a publisher. We're always interested to see what people's feedback are. Because it's
Hmm.
one of those rare experiences to see, okay, how'd it go? Like, what'd you learn? What are things to improve on? And that kind of stuff. So, yeah, cool
Hmm.
stuff. I'm excited.
We will
So,
certainly be doing we'll certainly be back to promote the Kickstarter, that's for sure.
yeah,
Once that's ready to come out and start promoting that, we'll certainly be here.
cool. Yeah, and if you need help promoting, obviously we'll do everything we can to help push in our networks too. So, be on the
Hmm.
lookout for that. Just like we mentioned before, we have this month coming up is our other campaign for was it March 22nd? Um, wrong button. We have the last Sunshine Rekindled. So anything, if you have a game coming out and you want to promote that, let us know, and we'll do the best we can to kind of get it out there as we start to grow and get them out to some more eyes for people to see. So, cool. All right. Well, if that kind of wraps things up, double checking to make sure. Oh yeah, Caleb was saying there's a Sugar Creek in Ohio. That's cool.
Yeah, figured that out. Normally, I Google my game titles before I get too far because it's like, okay, is there any other game or property I'm accidentally infringing upon?
Yeah,
Yeah, there is a real Sugar Creek. There is a town, Sugar Creek, Ohio. So,
cool. Awesome. Yeah, although it wasn't here the whole time. It was a really insightful conversation about narratives and storytelling. Cool. Yeah, and excited about to see how the studio will expand. Yes, cool. Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's gonna do it for today. So I think we're gonna wrap it up here, and just thank you, Adam, again for talking a bit about narratives in games. And so I think what we're gonna do now, and I don't even know if I really need to kind of move through, but I'll kind of showcase our face again. Hopefully the video won't go crazy. So. Um, but yeah, I just want to thank everybody for coming out today. Like I said, we have our next event is our prototype and play event, which is the second Friday of the month, which is March 11th from 6 to 8 p.m. Right here in our Discord channel. We basically just have some bring some food. So if you like pizza or something like that, bring some drinks. Just kind of have a chill night of playing games and giving feedback and catching up with folks. That'll be March 11th. We have our Let's Play series, the third Sunday of the month, and then our GameDev Meetup again on March, the last Saturday of the month. So keep a lookout on that, and yeah, keep a lookout for GDEX. GDEX is coming up pretty fast this year because we've basically half the time. So we're getting some things finalized, but if you're interested, there's tickets up, and then we're going to have more information about the GDEX Game Jam like we do for the last 2 years. It's going to be just as fun and just as amazing, and if you want that experience to know what it's like to kind of work a little bit in the game industry in a sense, work with some folks, and you do not need game development experience at all. We pair you up with folks, with those types of experience to kind of balance out the teams. But it's a lot of fun, and like we said, it's kind of a casual jam because it's like usually, almost about 9-10 days. So you got a lot of time to kind of play around with it and make some really good stuff. We do a judging session just to kind of get people some feedback, and we showcase, the results of what you all made. It's not really a competition, but just kind of a fun thing to do, just so people can kind of almost get in there and make some really cool stuff within those 9 days. So more information on that coming up soon, and just kind of doing more of this. So thanks everybody for coming out today. We're going to go ahead and jump into the Discord channel, which will be in the general chat. So actually I can do it direct. Let me go ahead. I'm going to be professional about this and switch off my Discord. But I'm going to grab for you all a link to go to so you can go there too. We already have someone in there. I got Sam in there. Cool. So if I were to put this in the chat, we'll catch up here. That's our Discord channel directly to the general voice channel. So definitely feel free to join us there for casual chats, and maybe feeling pretty cool, we'll do a game or something and have a great time. So again, thanks everybody for coming out today. That's the end of our stream. We'll see you here in a little bit. If nothing else, keep us posted with questions. Keep posting your games. Keep making games, and we'll see you all at the next Game Dev event and the next Game Dev Meetup in March. So thanks everybody for chatting, for stopping by. We'll catch you later, and if nothing else, you have a great rest of your weekend. See you guys. We'll talk to you later.